Let's bring in Paybarah and Philip Bump. Ozzy is a senior reporter for Politico New York, and Philip is a national correspondent for The Washington Post. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. Let's talk about this FBI probe. Up until this point, we've talked about former Trump aides. Now you've got a current White House aide, quote unquote, under scrutiny. So, Philip, how does that change things?
Well, to be honest, I'm not sure that from the inside it changes things a whole lot. I mean, the Post actually broke the story last week that there was a senior official within the administration who was under scrutiny. We know today now, we can report that that is Kushner. But obviously Kushner has known for some time that he's under investigation, the same way that a lot of these other folks that were mentioned in that segment knew as well. I think what it does, though, is to the point that was made in that piece, it reinforces to everyone else on the outside that this is an investigation that is still in the early stages. The administration, and Trump in particular, likes to say no evidence, no evidence, no evidence, but he's saying that it's the analogy I like to use is he's saying it in the first 10 minutes of an episode of 2020. Like we don't know yet what is going to happen because the investigation has just gotten underway.
Yeah, what about that, Ozzy? I mean, to Philip's point, does it sort of underscore the fact that there is still a long way to go in this FBI probe?
Yeah, and if it brings the probe into the White House, obviously Jared Kushner has a very full portfolio, almost comically full.
Right.
You know,
but how many does he have? Like,
it's more of a question of what he doesn't have, right?
Right.
And to now have this added to his plate, it brings this as close to Trump as closer to Trump than anything else has gone before. Now he's not a target. He wasn't identified as a target, but he was identified as someone of interest. Now that could change. But clearly this has gotten closer to Donald Trump, and it is very hard for him to keep insisting that this has nothing to do with him, that this is all fake news, when the person he trusts the most is now wrapped up in it.
Ozzy brings up a good point. I mean, target and under scrutiny, these are not the same things. So let's make that clear for our viewers, Philip.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There are no charges that are imminently going to be filed against Jared Kushner. Essentially what the FBI reportedly wants is they want to get information from him. But there is one little detail in the Washington Post story that's worth mentioning, which is that among the things Kushner is being investigated for are, quote, possible financial crimes. We don't know what that means. We don't know if it relates to the bank that was mentioned in the front end of that piece. We don't know what that means. So it's not the case that there will certainly never be any charges filed. It's just at this point in time, it's not as though we're about to see a perp walk on the front lawn of the White House.
Right, and there's a divergence between what investigators are doing and what Trump is saying. Trump is saying that there's nothing here, this is all fake news, it's a conspiracy against me, and clearly the investigators are saying there's a lot more information we want, and they want to talk to Jared Kushner.
Which may all come to nothing.
Right.
Yeah, but we're still very early yet. Well, CBS News, meantime, has learned that the administration is working to develop a dedicated messaging team to push back on the Russia investigation. So, hearing that, Philip, what could that look like? I mean, you're basically then talking about a team that deals with nothing but essentially pushing back on some of these stories and accusations.
Well, I mean, theoretically, the White Houses in the past have communication staff that are effective at talking about what the White House is doing. We haven't seen a White House that has been so under fire so much so early in the administration, but we've also never seen a White House that has a communications team that is so willing to sort of mislead the public. We've seen multiple examples of them doing that. There have been these rumors floating out there that Trump wants to rely on Corey Lewandowski, his first campaign manager, David Bossie, who was a deputy campaign manager toward the end of the campaign, which seems to me less like a strategy for bringing in people who are experts than it does bringing in people who Trump feels comfortable and safe with. And so that suggests to me, if those rumors are true, that Trump may be feeling a little more heat than he lets on publicly.
Yeah. And he has said before that his own press office can't even keep up with him. Right. So his desire to have new spokespeople or even have himself more engaged in the conversation. This is clearly not a topic he wants to discuss, but if he is going to have to answer questions about it, he's going to want to rely on people that he trusts. And the people that have come out so far have been contradicted at times within minutes of speaking. They are losing credibility when they do come out and appear. So Trump may have to turn to new people in order to get across the message he wants.
And he may have to turn to new people who are actually old people because they will put up with that.
Exactly.
There's not a lot of people who right now are eager to go and be a spokesperson for Donald Trump.
I mean, but isn't that a tough position to be in, though? I mean, you know, when you're basically charged with giving the message of the commander-in-chief, and yet that could change at any given moment. Right. So, I mean, no matter what you decide for your team or your rapid response team, isn't it still going to be challenging, Ozzy, to be in that position?
Right, but the people that Trump has relied on in the past are willing to put their credibility on the line. They are willing to defend Trump irrespective of any other information that comes out there.
They've done it before.
They have done it before. They will do it again, and they have stood in front of reporters. They have stood in front of the public, have misled, have omitted truth, have come up with alternative facts, and they have no problem doing it the next day. And that is something that most people do not want to do.
Interesting. All right. Well, President Trump, meantime, has slammed leaks to the press for months. On Thursday, he did so at the urging of British Prime Minister Theresa May, who complained about U.S. news reports on the Manchester terror attack. Philip, help us unpack what happened there.
So, I mean, it's almost sort of hard to wrap your head around. So Donald Trump appears to be developing a habit of revealing information he's not supposed to. There was this report at the beginning of last week about how he was in a meeting with Russian officials and revealed possibly classified information that we later learned of reporting suggested that it was classified information that had been provided by Israel to the United States and was not meant to be shared to the Russians at all. There were reports today, and I believe a little bit yesterday, that the Israeli intelligence services were therefore sort of pushing back, or sort of planning to withhold more information from the United States as a result of that, because they didn't feel they could trust it. Theresa May and the British government became very frustrated when photographs that were taken at the scene of the Manchester terror attack earlier this week leaked out, and it seems pretty clear based on the fervor with which Donald Trump spoke about that issue today that he had gotten leaned on a little bit by the British. These are things that normally aren't real problems with presidents, but it literally ties exactly to what we were just talking about, which is Donald Trump says what he wants when he wants to say it, regardless of who gets hurt in the fallout from that.
Yeah.
And during the campaign, he had made it clear that Hillary Clinton shouldn't be elected because she doesn't understand the meaning of the word classified. Now here he is, President Trump himself, contradicting candidate Trump, acting as if he does not know the meaning of the word classified.
And aren't these two sort of separate things, though? Because on the one hand, our Major Garrett was telling us earlier that you've got a law enforcement leak of some kind with the publication of these photographs at the Manchester attack site. And on the other hand, what President Trump has been talking about are leaks from within the West Wing at times and the complaints about that. So it sort of seemed to be a linkage of two not so connected things, perhaps. I mean, in theme broadly, when you talk about leaks, but not necessarily exactly the same thing.
That's totally a fair point. And the leaks that Donald Trump has been concerned about and complained about are primarily leaks from the intelligence services, which there has been some reporting that suggests that those leaks are motivated in part by concern about how Donald Trump got into office and what happened over the course of the campaign. You're right, that's a different sort of leak. It's not clear what happened with these leaks with the Manchester photos because information is now shared from the federal level to the local level when there are incidents like this. It's not clear where that leak came out, so that is true. That's
and we have to point out that, as others have, that there are actual real-world implications for that, because now then terrorists, according to officials, will have the playbook and essentially know this is what they're looking for, they're onto us. So let's move on, though. Let's talk about another thing. What are the implications of the Senate Intelligence ranking members getting this blanket authority to issue subpoenas now in the Russia probe? What does that mean? I mean, what can they do now that they couldn't do before?
Well, it certainly suggests that, as the point that was made earlier, that this is something that there was a question once the special counsel was appointed, whether or not the congressional inquiries would go forward at the same pace they were going on before. This certainly suggests that they are. We saw earlier this week, for example, the head of the chairman and the ranking member of the Senate Intelligence Committee came out and said that they were not going to accept Michael Flynn, saying he wasn't going to respond to their subpoenas. So essentially what this is the Senate saying, we are putting real resources into this. We are looking at this. And quite frankly, I think that Michael Flynn's choosing to take the fifth in response to appearing before that committee and refusing to return over those documents probably didn't do him any favors in terms of getting them off his back. I think they saw it as a slight, and I think this is another step toward trying to show that the Senate is a body that needs to be paid attention to.
Yeah,
right. And even though the Senate is, like the House of Representatives, is controlled by Donald Trump's party, the Senate Intelligence Committee is not acting as if they are doing the White House any favors by this. It is very often misunderstood in Washington that if you're in the same party, you have the same agenda. And that is very clear that in the Senate, they have taken a different path on any number of issues than their colleagues in the House. And particularly when they are asking for information and you rebuff them, no matter what your party label is, senators want to have the respect that their questions get answered, and Michael Flynn is not doing that.
They don't appreciate that. Let's talk about NATO. The president has wavered in his attitude on NATO. Of course, he called NATO obsolete, seemed to back off from that a little bit. But then it was interesting to hear him basically go back to the campaign themes of NATO members need to pay up, essentially. What do you think is behind that? He also didn't endorse that mutual aid pledge, Philip.
I think it's really important that people understand that the way Donald Trump describes that commitment is totally inaccurate. Essentially what happened was NATO members all agreed to spend 2% of their GDP on their own military so that they could contribute to joint military exercises in the future. Right now, the United States does bear most of that burden. It's absolutely true. But that is also because we spend a lot more of our GDP on our military. We have a much bigger military relative to NATO than all these other countries do. So when Donald Trump talks about the money that is owed, essentially what he's talking about is those countries that didn't yet spend 2% of their GDPs on their military. It's not money owed to NATO. It's not money owed to us. Yes, we do bear a disproportionate amount of the workload in NATO, but we're also the biggest country. We have the biggest military, and it's, you know, we often are the ones driving the agenda. And to the point about this mutual protection, this Article 5, the only time that's been invoked was after September 11th. We are the ones that asked NATO to stand with us at that point in time. So there are all these ways in which the way Donald Trump talks about it, an evolution from how I talked about on the campaign trail, simply isn't accurate.
Right, and he wants to wrap this up in this mantra of America first. You know, that if America's interests are being harmed, he's going to speak out against it. What is problematic is that with the Russia probe that is happening, he sounds and he fits the stereotype of what the critics are saying about him, which is that he is too closely linked to Vladimir Putin, that he is pushing an agenda that's more friendly to the Kremlin than it is to Washington, D.C. and American interests. So when he denigrates NATO, when he weakens the NATO alliance, when he doesn't endorse aspects of that alliance, he doesn't say Russia, but critics see in him that he is acting closer to their interests and on their behalf than on America's interests. So what is happening domestically shades how people can interpret what he does abroad.
All right, finally, let's talk about some domestic issues here. Let's talk about this congressional race in Montana. So CBS News politics team has been adamant that this race should not be looked at as a referendum on either party. So why does this matter? Why should this matter, Ozzy?
Everyone likes to consider special elections special because there are unique candidates, it's an off cycle, people come out that don't normally come out. But one of the things that it does gauge, it provides a snapshot of how interested and motivated voters are. And you could potentially see how activated and organized Democrats are. They have Donald Trump as a potential target. You had the healthcare vote to repeal or replace, or however you want to describe what they've done to Obamacare. And this turnout will impact, or at least give people a measure as to how Democrats in a red state are acting, and that could potentially clue people in, donors in particular, towards other races coming up in the future.
But aren't Montanans independent-minded anyway? I mean, isn't it hard to kind of look at this one state where there are a lot of different factors that Montanans use to make their political decisions?
Right. Well, and these are also two very unusual candidates, one of whom is this cowboy singing poet, and the other who wrestles reporters unwillingly. Ozzy's absolutely right, obviously, that this is going to be seen as some sort of metric for how Donald Trump is viewed nationally. The thing to remember, and when we look at the returns tonight, it's expected that the gentleman who body slammed the reporter yesterday, Gianforte, he's probably going to win. He's probably going to win by a few percentage points. It's hard to say. There hasn't been very good polling. But Donald Trump won the state by more than 20 points, won by about 21 points. And as such, that suggests a big shift, because this was only last November coming up into May. And the question that arises is that Donald Trump's trump card, so to speak, is that Republicans like him, and Republicans on Capitol Hill are worried to cross him because Republicans still like him. If they start to see signs that Republicans don't like him enough to come out and win these elections, they may start wavering on their support for Trump. And with the idea of impeachment being talked about out there in the atmosphere, that's very dangerous for the president.
All right, a lot to watch. Ozzy Paybarah and Philip Bump, thank you both for stopping by. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.